This is Fam Electric Ghost, and we're live on the air with Marcus Higgs, a communication coach for parents of preteens. And I want to welcome you to the Fam Electric Ghost podcast. How you doing?
I'm doing well, Phantom. It's good to be here. Thank you for sharing your platform. Yeah.
Well, it's fun. We've been doing podcasting since 2016. This is actually episode 1122 of the Fam
Hey.
Electric Ghost podcast. We've been doing it for a while. We do have your link there, https://marcushiggs.com. That will be fully clickable, so people don't have to remember it, but that's not a hard one to remember, but it will be clickable. And so folks will be able to check that out. We do have as a concept for the subject for this episode, balancing tech, real connections for preteens, helping preteens form healthy relationships, self-validation, and independence despite social media influences, which is a handful, but we're going to talk through it. And again, thank you for being on the show. And what couple of questions before we start into to dive into to the nuts and bolts of everything we're going to discuss today is we ask every podcast guest these two questions before we start. Like, what
All right.
motivates you, and why do you do what you do?
Hey, what motivates me and why do I do what I do? Um, there are a lot of things that motivate me. One book that I keep behind me, you'll see right here, is a book for the fifth graders that I taught in Thailand. I do teach now, different audience, but same skills of teaching. Now I help parents with their communication with preteens. I used to teach high school, and I taught English language arts for grade 12 and grade 9. And then I started teaching for grade 5. Yeah. So that's one of the reasons why I do what I do it for. Also for me, when reflecting back on my father and my relationship with him during those formative years, they always say, if you're going to teach something, who would you help? Who did you need back then? And while we have a good relationship now, I mean, we went through our growing pains, and he was an adult in the room, so he set the tone. And I think what I do now is just like, this is what younger Marcus could have, should have, would have said. But you know, he was going through his growing pains too. That's what motivates me. That's what motivates me. What was the second question again, Pam?
Well, just one of the questions I always ask is like, what motivates you, but why do you do what you do?
Oh, why?
Yeah.
For that sounds cheesy. For a brighter future. It says, a nation is made great by men who plant trees for the shade they'll never see. And I remember I was at a wedding one time, and my friend said, you know, I like the videos you're putting out, but what is all this for? His daughter was sitting on his lap, and I said, if you and your daughter have a better relationship, a more healthy, secure attachment because of the work I put out there, then my work is done. Like, I want you to be good with your relationships, and for real, that is why I do what I do.
I think that's real important because a lot of times, you know, parents don't realize sometimes because they've inherited some of the bad practices that they grew up with, the toxicity of that like microcosm environment. I was a sociology major, so the idea like the microcosm and the macrocosm is like, you know, what you say actually has an impact.
Sure,
and sometimes people just because they're an elder, they can like say anything without understanding the consequence of you say something and you damage somebody's psyche. Like you say, they're never going to be good enough. You kind of set up in that child like a whole stack of cards is going to be decked. You know, it's decked.
In a phrase, I say, be mindful of the voice with which you speak to children, for in time that becomes a mind with which, or the voice with which they speak to themselves. So you're absolutely right.
It's so important. It's just because grandpa's kind of taught you and great grandpa taught you to do that, where they maybe didn't know what they should do. Right? They didn't. So just following what they did isn't necessarily the right thing to do. Right. So sometimes you have to do a little bit more work, I think, as a parent. And I think people like resources like yourself start to, you know, make that available, which I think maybe like the other generations didn't have that available. And that's a problem, but like we can address it now.
Well, you know, in class, we say, if a kid is not meeting expectations, it's one of two things. It's three, but one of two things. Either they don't have the skills to do it, or they don't feel supported in growing those skills. The third is it's just not important to them. But I think most parents, for the parents who I want to work with, it is important to them. So there's no judgment towards it, but it's just you don't have this, you haven't developed the skills yet, or you don't feel supported in growing those skills. And yeah, you're right. That's what I'm here for.
It's real important because a lot of times in school, like we don't learn some of the things as like you would think, core listening skills, like listen to your child. Just don't think you have a hierarchical, there's a hierarchical like relationship. I get it wrong the way I said it, but the idea is like just because you're an elder doesn't mean you're the only one with wisdom in the room, right? And doesn't mean that you're always doing everything right. And so the idea to know what you don't know, like you're saying, is like if you can be aware, have self-awareness to know what you don't know, and reach out to somebody that get help. I think that's a really big thing. Some people, their ego or their level of shame they might have to ask a question, to ask for help. Do you find that the people come to you? I guess they're already asking for help. Do you ever have to kind of help with that process?
Yeah, I would say two things. One, I respect the wisdom that is with the parent. So like, I'm never going to say like, I'm going to respect you and your journey of how you want to approach parenting. That said, I'll also share with you. I've had this conversation many a times, other things that work for people, because every situation is unique. And you're right. Whenever you're experiencing something, it is not the thing you're experiencing. It's how you're relating to it. And these formative years of teenage years, they're characteristic of certain things of pushback, which is a healthy thing, which is actually the natural order of things. But when you understand how the teenage brain is working, you learn how to be more patient with it. You know what to expect and the bumps and bruises you're going to go through with the growing pains. So, there are people who say, no, my way is the right way. And then it's just like, well, let me give you some other perspective. You're right.
Yeah, my way or the highway. Like I kind of grew up with that, kind of like a James Brown kind of mindset. Like, I'm the Godfather. You got to listen to everything I say. So you got to get a fine if you don't.
Say a fine. A fine and you're behind it. Yeah.
A fine for missing a note. It's like, what? Dad, there's no bad note. It's like, I tell you, I think there is a bad note and you're paying a fine for it. But yeah, because I'm kind of more of a free spirit. I'm a musician. And I'm kind of in the mindset like, oh, there's no bad note, there's opportunity. And you get a guy like James Brown's like, no, there is a bad note, and you're getting fined because you didn't hit it. But two areas of the continuum there. But so open communication, like that's one of the first things I wanted to get into is like sometimes do teenagers, with parents is like, are teenagers like kind of tendency to like keep things for themselves, away from their parents? So how much of that is a two-way street in terms of getting the teenager to be more open and then the parents to be more open? It's like it's probably self-evident, but maybe we can talk about it.
Well, I mean, I can give you a metaphor. Think about it like this, right? Well, first of all, I'll set it up to say why they shut down at first and then why they continue to shut down. So the first thing is, at this stage in the game, they're seeking their independence when they come in to view of different perspectives. As a dependent, your word was gospel. The whole world was black and white because everything that you said, they assumed was true. Now, when they start to take different perspectives of other trustworthy adults inside their lives and other points of view, they start to say, well, is this right? And skepticism starts to seep in. So that's where mistrust starts, right? Where it's like, I can't believe everything that you say, and they don't know what nuance is of saying, yeah, two people can be speaking their truth, but they are conflicting. So they're trying to figure out who they are, what they are, right? And there's an identity breaking. The metaphor I want to share with you is, think about this, right, fam? If every time you invited somebody to your house, they would flip over the sofa, or maybe mess up the pictures on the wall. And then, they track their feet, track dirt, and then they'd leave a bad smell in they'd leave.
Yeah, no responsibility.
Now the next person, every time they come by, they help straighten up things a little bit. You know, not too much judgment. They might maybe even leave some food or something. That first person you wouldn't invite back to your house, would you?
No.
The second one who helps clean it up and helps straighten it up, and actually even leaves something for you, you might say, you know what, come back when you're ready. Come when you're ready. Now, your mind is like your home. That's your citadel, you could say. You wouldn't invite somebody over who constantly craps inside your citadel and leaves it dirtier than when they came. Oftentimes, when we enter into a child's conversational mind, some people who don't, and I've been guilty of this times or two, who aren't aware of what they're doing inside there. That's why the child doesn't want to open up. The child is like, I don't want to open my door to you anymore.
Yeah,
trust is built over time. Well, yeah, you then lost trust again.
Well, it's just like the impact of words. I mean, I hear a lot of adults acting like words don't matter. And if you have very pessimistic tone, very self-defeating tone, angry tone, an arrogant tone, kind of like the difference between, like, I always have this example. I had this, creative art writing teacher in high school.
All right. Yeah.
And then I had like a really tight grammar teacher. The grammar teacher would come back and red mark everything. And then I dreaded coming into handing assignments to this teacher, because their style about feedback was kind of like, you got it all wrong. Where the creative writing teacher, even if you got it wrong, she found the nuggets that were good and came to you and told you like what you did right kind of first, and then kind of snuck in where you can make it better. And
rooms for improvement.
I always enjoyed going to that class more than the class of the one that just red marked everything and made me feel like terrible. Like I don't know how to write. So it's like if you think about your approach, like if you had a teacher that does that and you do that for math, you do that for science, like you can tune out like 80% of the class, and 10% of the class actually succeeds and 80% don't. And that's actually the fault of the teacher, not the fault of the student.
You know what it is? Have you ever heard of the Pygmalion effect? Or let me explain it to the audience. It's people move towards your expectation. So when they would tell a teacher, hey, they had two classes, they would tell the teacher, these are low achieving students. And then this class, they're high achieving students. And at the end of the semester, for sure, the high achievers achieved highly and the low achievers achieved lower expectations. The thing was, both classes were neutral. The thing that changed was how the teacher addressed and treated the students. There's an assumption that there's beauty in the kid, and if you create the context for that thing for the beauty in the kid to flourish, they'll move towards your expectations. That's one thing I do share with the parents. And then to your point, there's also another phrase that says, twice I did good, heard it never. Once I did bad and heard it forever. Because we have ants, automatic negative thoughts. We're always looking for the ants. Like, what's bad? What's bad? What's bad? But if you cultivate and praise what's good inside there, that doesn't mean everything's perfect. But what it means is I'm focusing on where you're doing well, and I'm focusing where you can grow. And it's a growth mindset. It's characteristic of a growth mindset.
Yeah, it's just a different approach. It's like if you can get more people to adopt, positive growth, in terms of like if you're going to teach algebra and you basically have the mindset that only 10% of the class is going to get it, versus like I want to get 90% of the class to get it. Right. So if you already think there's some like just magical mathematical geniuses in the class and I'm only going to teach to them, versus
I'm going to
make it accessible. Yeah. It's like, okay, so if you think about it, if you're a math teacher and you teach kids like how this math equates to video games, all kids love Xbox,
make it relevant.
And PlayStation. And you show them how physics applies to Mario, or how polygons apply to Sonic, or whatever. Then they'll get there's like if it's just esoteric and you can't show it, like a STEM type of idea. Like if you
Sure.
actually show them how it works, and that don't think yeah, you can, they'll get it if you believe they can get it, like you said. But if you believe they can't get it, then you're going to teach, like well, they're never going to get it.
There's this theory called self-determination theory, and it's three things. It says autonomy, so they want to have to want it. And when I say they have to want it, the second thing is relevancy. They have to see how it's relevant to them. You were using the example of Mario. I told one parent one time, I was just like, you know what? These math concepts really, she's not going to want it until it's relevant to her. And where it's relevant is often finances. Like if she had to manage money, she's going to learn very quickly how to do this stuff.
Then they want it. Show them how to
And
do
the
Bitcoin. Like, how do you invest in Bitcoin or Wall Street?
and the third thing is just mastery. They have to see their growth. But if you're always focusing on not, so make it relevant to them, make them see their growth in it, and then also autonomy. Like it has to be self-directed. They have to find curiosity in it. Yeah.
Also, like what I find is sometimes like the childlike nature is like very adventurous. You can think about it, like when you are a kid and you go to learn how to ride a bike, you'll fall down, skin your knee, and you still keep on getting on the bike till you learn how to do it, right? And you're the same thing with like a skateboard or roller skates. Like, but then later in life, you lose that because you're scared about what you won't do. I don't want to see somebody see me falling off the bike or falling off the skateboard or falling off the skate. So you don't put that, you just don't have that determination of the young kids. Like, yeah, I'm going to get this. Versus like, so how can you get that kind of drive that makes a kid want to ride a bike to apply to a lot of other things?
That would be determination or perseverance. That is a character trait. And in my studies, not my studies, but in my approach, the show up framework, we do focus on character traits. And that's what it is. It starts with a strong identity. And the idea is all of these character traits are with you, and we create conversations around that so that we can help develop that inside the child.
Mm-hmm.
Mind you, I mean, people do have different temperaments, and your kid is growing, but it's at this stage nurturing and planting the seeds. So it's what we call age appropriate.
Mm-hmm.
There's some lessons that, I mean, I see you have a bit of wisdom down here that we learned later on in life, but at this age, we can actually still plant seeds that will flourish later on.
Yeah, showing up. I mean, that's a big thing. I mean, as a musician or even an athlete, like I'm a musician, and like the way you approach like learning a keyboard or a bass is like you keep on showing up until it becomes like muscle memory, right?
Yeah.
And then you don't. Then it just becomes like, okay, like how far am I going to go learning a different genre? So you might be treading water a little bit to go do Chopin or try to do Miles or try to do Coltrane, try to do something that's beyond your capability, but you still had a base level that you got to, and then you can push yourself. And it's like that desire to not be scared of failing. A lot of times as being a creative person, like we are in this zone like we're always kind of pushing the envelope where like I am not always the best at something I'm trying if it's new, right? I'm not always going to be at the top of my game if I'm trying to expand. And willingness to do that in a world that wants you to be repeatable and steady and kind of in the box. Society has some of these things that kind of make you just not be adventurous. So how do you balance that?
Is that a question? How do you balance that? I think.
Yeah, because like there's some people get stuck in a box versus the people who are more adventurous, and maybe the child is more adventurous in their younger age. As they get older, they make it a little less adventurous.
The quote comes to mind, Dolly Parton, when she says, "The key to life is figuring out who you are and then doing it on purpose." because there's no greater privilege than to be who you are, right? And what it is in the show up framework, we're starting with a strong identity. And that's what it is. We bring their awareness to the dopeness that is within them, right? And then after that,
Mhm.
we hold space for collaboration so they know that they feel supported. We open up communication so that we can help them process their thoughts. And then we wonder and explore this world together. That means making an effort together inside using their character traits. And when I say character traits, I'll explain it to you like this. It's virtues and values. Virtues are 24 character traits that are with all people. This is something from positive psychology. The
Mhm.
24 traits are, you can take the test right now, actually. It's called Virtues in Action. They're with all religions, all cultures, all humanity. And they're traits like creativity, bravery, leadership, curiosity. And then we have values. Values just means what's important to you. For some people, it could be
Mhm.
family. Other people, it might be nature. Other people, it might be finances. But when I know what your virtues and values are, I know what's important to you, and I know how you show up to those things. So I'm crafting all my communication around speaking to your being, to your essence, to your core.
Oh wow.
And I'm speaking to you. Like, this is what I would do in the class. Like, you have all these students here. I knew my students. Now I'm just leveraging that to help parents understand your audience, like know who they are so that you can cultivate that.
Yeah, because I think a lot of times parents have an expectation they impose on their child without actually looking at their individuality. So you might have somebody say, "Well, I want my kid to be a doctor. I want my kid to
Mm,
be an athlete." So they start imposing rather than asking their kid, what is it do you want to be? They're not mature enough to know what they want to be. So they start directing them where they want to be without having the conversation. So I wonder with parents, if you see a parent that's kind of like dictating who that kid's going to be without, and you kind of notice that kid's not the picture that the parents saying they are.
I
Uh,
remember
yeah.
I taught in Korea, and I used to teach adult learners as well. And we had this girl who was she corporate? Yeah, I believe so. She was a woman then, young lady. She came in and she said, my mother chose what school I went to. She chose what instrument I practice. I did everything that she asked for. Then she chose the partner who I married and the university that I went to. And then she said, you know what? And I'm not satisfied. I have everything that was chosen for me. And this is the path, but it's not mine.
Yeah. It's imposed path, kind of set.
And I mean, and you know what? I approach most everything. I approach all of it with no judgment. I'm curious about it, just curious to understand. And there is a life satisfaction that girl wasn't experiencing, even though she followed the script that was given to her.
Hmm.
Again, in self-determination theory, you won't be fulfilled unless you understand you're collaborating, you're interdependent with all these other things. As parents, you're right. Sometimes we impose things, but the etymology, the root of the word parent, means to bring forth. Just like with education, education and parent means to
Yeah.
bring forth. Yeah.
Should try to, cultivate. Like if you feel like if you start to see like your kids, like you want to send them to be like in the soccer camp, and then you actually see that, well, they're a dancer, but you still force them into a soccer camp. It's like, they want to go do ballet. It's like, well, like you're kind of direct opposition to
Well,
who they are.
I would say this. During adolescence, that's when we do try many things, in as much
Mhm.
as your pocketbook could could afford. But you don't have to break the bank. But you try many things. Um, and two other things I'll add to that. Let it be self-directed by the kid that they do try hard things and they try them for a long period of time. So it's effort over
Mhm.
time. So that teaches them not to give up, and it teaches them, hey, this is who you want to be. This is what you said you want to try, and I support you in you expressing yourself. But we don't give up, and that comes from Angela Duckworth in her book Grit, of saying in her
Yeah, I
family
guess.
everybody commits to one thing for a long period. Yeah.
Well, I think that's important because sometimes a lot of people I noticed where I was going to school with some like high achievers, and the parents were like having them like do maybe too many things at
Mm,
once. And then there was a tendency where like they would drop some because they were getting like overloaded. If you get overloaded, then it's like, synesthesia. You're getting hit with too much and you can't really process. And then you have a tendency to kind of give it up because like you're not given enough time or space to actually explore it in a way whether you can be, comfortable. So like you don't want to like overload somebody and like make them just not enjoy life because they're so overscheduled that they don't
yeah.
have any space.
But every context is unique, and there are some generalities. Yeah, they always say there's no book on parenting. The truth is there are many books. However, the best book on parenting is the one that you're going to write. So I help parents with their communication and the story that they're writing with their kid, because the kids are dependent. They're going to grow into their independence, and just change happens. And what happens with human development is they separate, and then if there's good development, then they become interdependent. There's a joining back together.
Mhm.
And ideally, that's what we want. That's what we want inside our communities. That's what we want. That's how the human body happens. It breaks apart in cells and it comes back together, and we're stronger in the broken places. So just understanding when that breaking happens and how it happens, it'll help you be interdependent again on the other side.
So it's kind of like when that breaking happens is kind of like the challenge to authority kind of phase where like a teen might potentially challenge like because you've been guiding them and then suddenly like you said they maybe meet some other adult that like makes them questions like, well, why am I doing this? Is it something? And then they start to like, well, go to the parent and say, maybe I don't agree with this direction.
Uh, it is a breaking, and they are challenged. So I'll say it like this: in a human, the challenge is always with yourself. Actually, I feel it's just that the kid's projected onto the parent because the parent is the other character, the antagonist inside their story. If a person is the protagonist, pro means forward. So the person who is going forward in the story, the person who actually feels in conflict to them is their parent. That's the best,
Mhm.
that's the primary character inside their story at that moment. Um, Now there is a way where you can position yourself to actually support them through it, which is the H, hold space for collaboration inside the show up framework. There are ways in which you can be seen as a trusted advisor by your child. It'll take effort because trust is built over time, but it's how do you help shape the narrative inside your kid's head when they start to push back. They will push back because
Mhm.
that's all change is. Change is two different forces, and this kid feels, well, I don't know what to expect here. Their emotions are high because there's a dump of chemicals, dopamine, and so on, which is natural. They're supposed to feel the high highs and the low lows during adolescence because, again, it's helping them form their identity and trying to figure this out. It's us as trusted, worthy adults in their lives to help keep them regulated and maintained. Yeah.
That's interesting. You brought the high highs and the low lows because now there's a lot of people that go into like the pharmaceuticals and they start, you know, putting the kids on a lot of psychoactive medicines. It's like it wasn't really necessary. And I can't could speak for every situation, but if there's some things that are natural and maybe the expectation is that well that's not natural, then you might go for a solution that maybe is maybe overbearing or more than what's necessary.
Overcorrecting.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's this Donald Glover, this is America. I mean, again, I trust the parents' wisdom. I do hold an opinion on that we are over medicating our kids with things that, again, I can't speak to each individual
Yeah.
case. I feel though America is over medicated in a general sense, and
Yeah.
many times we look for the solution at the bottom of a bottle, some that is legal, some that is not legal, that with stuff that can be managed by how we eat, move, sleep, and work out, and so on. But
Well,
yeah,
also
you're
just
right.
the mind. It's like
Yeah.
mindset is so powerful because I'm into a lot of Eastern philosophies. I mean, I lived in
Hmm.
Japan
Oh
and
yeah, awesome.
a lot of time, yeah, I lived in Tokyo for like 2 years. But the idea, a lot of times we have these magic bullets. So we
Hmm.
think everything's got to be like a procedure or a pill or some kind of substance, and they don't want to do the hard work of actually thinking about like like the looking glass self, like the Victorians, like look in the mirror and take on the other in the room who is you, right?
Hmm.
Take them on and actually ask the
Self
questions like,
introspection.
why am I feeling this way? Why am I being triggered by this? Why am I? And so if you're a creative person, a lot of times you look into those deep things and you use your art to be a cathartic vehicle to dive into it.
Sure.
But if you don't
Yeah.
know how to do art therapy, right? If you're not in that kind of mindset as a creative, you
Hmm.
might have a brick wall where you're like, I don't know how to process this stuff. So then you go for the pill, or you go for the
Yeah.
procedure, or you go for instead of trying to use like your mind and your body and your soul and your heart to kind of solve it in a human way, that you
I'll,
go for this external
I'll make it
use.
even relevant to the to this conversation. It's exactly what you said, where people, even adults, that's what we're doing. You're speaking in a general sense, and I'll make it more specific, what it means for preteens. We noticed in 2012 there was an uptick in the mental disorders of kids, right? And you can read about this in the book. It's called The Anxious Generation, I believe. And they noticed that kids who were born after 1995, um, they were having more mental health issues. And this was a generation that was raised on social media.
Mm,
We're still here? All right.
yeah,
And what it was these were the kids who were raised on screens, and they were forming their identities behind the glass, I say. So it's in challenges and in likes, and they're getting their worldview by something of communities out inside the interspaces. Now, I'm not against the internet. I mean, we're talking right here, right?
yeah,
But the thing is, when the glass closes or when the machine is turned off, the question is, who am I? And if you don't know who I am when that glass closes, you don't know how to manage stress. And there are three primary stresses of life. There's the stress to maintain, there's a stress that hits you out of the blue, and there's a stress to expand. However, do you expect to expand or deal with issues that hit you out of the blue, or even just maintain being if you don't know who you are? So that's why
yeah.
we say it starts with a strong identity. It's all of what you said, and that is self introspection. We don't know how to look into ourselves because we're constantly looking and consuming.
Yeah, there's a lot of people who want to regulate social media, um, and there's a lot of reasons why you might want to, because like for very, and a developing mind, like a young teen, and they're seeing all these, and the thing is, the social media companies, they're big business. They're running algorithms to make money, and those algorithms don't necessarily help a developing mind, right? They might help a bottom line of the big company. I'm in tech, and I know why
Sure.
tech does what they do. Um, and a lot of times they do something just because they can create it without thinking about the consequences of what they created. And so it's up to parents and up to other people and regulators and the public to decide. Just because it can do it or just because it produces it doesn't mean it's good. Just because it's got a million views doesn't mean it's actually the best thing for your kid.
Well, I mean, it comes down to, again, what do you value? Some people value the views. It's worth noting, fam, right? The people who created the technology, they don't let their kids use it.
Yeah, that tells you.
It's a wonder, right? And then the next thing, for the parents who are out there, There are a lot of initiatives in schools, certain schools, to say they don't allow tech until past 8th grade. That's one, because we are the stories we tell ourselves. And if we're looking at all these disjointed stories on the screen, quickly scrolling, who are we? But I want to give some hope to say there are rooms of people who are paid hundreds and thousands of dollars to learn how to fracture, how to hook your attention. So it's not
Yeah.
your fault. It is your responsibility to turn it off, but it's not your fault. So I mean, it is engineered to steal your attention. That's something to be
Yeah.
mindful of.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I'm a software designer, so I know
Mhm.
why things are being built, and I know what the point is. Right. So the issue is a lot of times people they have a blind trust in tech.
Mm.
You know, like the arguments with AI today is like, oh, just because you can do it doesn't mean it's actually right in terms of privacy and rights,
Sure.
ownership. The AI can do whatever it wants because it has a lot of capability. It's going beyond our laws. It's going beyond morality. And then when you have a lot of young kids in the age of robotics and AI, the tech has a problem because it's not regulated. They're not the moral issues behind it, the legal issues behind it have not been worked out. And it's actually developing exponentially to a point where, the conversation needs to happen where, at
Well,
least for yourself and your families to decide what is right for you.
well, to this point, right, fam? I always say tech speeds up the flow of consciousness. Really, what tech is, it's new innovation that helps us communicate, collaborate quicker. There used to be a time when the pen was new technology and when the wheel was technology, right? So then it's just the medium. What we need to do is actually put an empowering message on it. And I think there's a way we can use tech to amplify the inner character of a kid. That's a solution I'm working on. We are the stories we tell ourselves. So I'm helping parents communicate a message to bring the kids awareness to their inside and the goodness that's inside them. I think also we can use technology to tell relevant stories to help kids form an identity that's strong. So I'm not against tech. I'm questioning
Yeah,
how might we leverage what technology is to be more awesome. I'm actually very hopeful for the coming age. And I'll add this. I know I'm saying a lot, but there's a last point that I will make. The price of technology is dropping so quickly, and the age of the developed world is increasing. You always look for where the future of the youth are, and that's in India and that's in Africa. With the price of technology dropping, and they have more access to these technologies, I want to enter these spaces and tell empowering stories to the youth there, because I see that as the wave of the future.
well, there's a lot of opportunity to learn
Oh, it's
and,
everywhere.
be an entrepreneur and actually, micro level economic development where with AI and robotics, if you've got an idea, you don't need a factory. You could have a 3D printer, AI, and build a micro enterprise and actually become very successful.
Yeah.
And so where the positivity is that you could take these things and treat them like tools, right? You treat them as tools and to leverage capabilities, but they also have to be aware of the destructive nature of any technology. Like the atom bomb is very destructive, or it could be a fusion reactor,
Or it could
right?
be a fusion reactor. Yeah.
It could be a fusion reactor, or it could be a thermonuclear weapon.
Yeah.
So, so it's like it's not all good, it's not all bad, but there's a tendency for some people to think it's all good
Mhm.
without thinking about any kind of negative aspect. And I think there's some issues with that.
Well, I'm well aware it could go either way. This is just me. I remember when I used to speak with, I say my kids, my students. One way to bring their awareness to their sovereignty, their agency, their power as a creative. I would never speak down to a person. I will always help them maintain their dignity. And one question you would always ask a kid is just, hey, is this the type of person you want to be? Now, mind you, I've been speaking to their virtues and values all the whole time, and I hold high expectations for them. And they know that I'm there to support them in whatever they want. And I would ask them, is this the type of person you want to be? Now, if it's not in alignment with what I want, I'm not going to support you in that. And that's not, I still love you. I still see you. You're still a whole person, but I can't support you in something that's not in alignment with what I want. That's how life is. You know what I mean? But life supports those who support life. Now, and the reason I say it like that is because, yeah, there are some initiatives that I don't support by bigger government or organizations or whatnot. More power to them. It is my job to live fully in expression of who I am, creating joy, peace, love, and as I align with my values.
Yeah,
And
you're
you know
right.
what? Other people don't agree with my values. That's cool. But where we do align, let's go get it. Let's make this an awesome place.
Yeah, I think the issues we're running into is that certain people have values that they think are above everyone else's.
Yeah.
And if they
Yeah.
get in certain positions, they prevent the freedom of anybody else exercising their point of view.
That's control. Yeah.
Yeah, and
That's another issue.
yeah, it's a totally different issue, but it actually exists. It's very heavy in the world today.
Yeah.
Not just
Yeah.
in America; it's everywhere.
This is to
Um,
be human.
yeah, and it's a kind of a like people think about like the big struggles. To me, is like true human independence and true critical thinking, right,
Hmm.
of individual people, and the freedom to actually have your
Express it.
values and
Hmm.
be able to freely express them without being put into the category of the other or isolated or despised, right? And that's a struggle going forward that people need to be, whether you whatever politics you have, it's like a true concept.
What you know what it is? There's this organization called Braver Angels. I don't know the details of it, but in a very broad sense, they bring together two polarizing people groups and they let them have conversations together. The reason I bring it up is because it reminds me of this Rumi quote. It says, if we push away everything, is paraphrased, if we push away everything that rubs us the wrong way, however will we be polished? The reason I think I have such a the reason that has helped my perspective on the world is, yeah, I've been in a lot of circles where you have to rub up against other values that don't align with yours. And that's how you gain an understanding of what life is. And you say, you know what? Yeah, okay, I see what you're saying. And I know I hold certain values too. And you respect those, I respect yours. I want you to be well. Um, and I will work towards that end. And if you don't want me to be well, that's on you. That's on you.
Well, I think it's good to when you have a young developing mind that they don't get caught in the rabbit hole of kind of
Us
there's
against them.
yeah, well, there's a downward spiral of like the us against them,
Mhm,
black and white,
mhm.
not really critical thinking, just saying like you're with us or you're against us. Like
And a
you're
lot of that
of
comes
us,
from social.
you're of us or you're not of us, right? You're the other and you're meant to be despised. It's like, oh, if you're an immigrant, you're causing a problem.
Mhm,
And there's a mindset within if you get stuck in that, whether you could be 10 years old, 15 years old, and you got that totally put into your head. And it takes years to get out of it. And
mhm.
then you're out there in the world with a very narrow lane, right? And you can have that lane, but it can be very destructive.
Very limiting. Uh, you know, you're absolutely right. And if you don't hold that view, we're all at a different stage in our journey, and that only comes from wisdom, again, that we both share. um, and it's holding space for people who haven't reached there yet, because there's some elements of that game that we didn't reach, or at least I can speak for me, until you're like 30,
Mhm.
until like you're 20, and it's just holding space for that person until they reach there. And until they reach there, you have to hold space of being regulated and being truly you,
Well, you
keeping it
still
together.
like as if you're in a neighborhood, right? And you have all these different people in the neighborhood. Like
Hmm.
going and asking your neighbor, no matter who they are, how are they today? Right? How are they doing? Do they need help with something? Instead of saying, well, I can't even ask them that, right?
Mm.
Right? Because they're in the other group. But
Yeah.
they don't believe what I do and they don't go to this. Like if you treat human beings the way you want to be treated, regardless of the dogma or whatever, right? And that to me is like
That's the
the
first
human,
commandment. Yeah,
yeah,
go
the first,
on.
they're just being able to like, because a lot of times in neighborhoods in America, like people in the neighborhood don't even talk to each other,
Yeah.
right? They don't. And so, like, if you're going to build a better world, it's like you start in your microcosm and ask your neighbor how they are, right? Even if it's in your family, right?
Yeah.
Ask your sister, ask your brother, ask your dad, ask your grandpa, like, how are they doing instead of just making assumptions.
That's what we say in positive psychology. Other people matter. And that's why we do need community, because at the end of it, it's about relationships. This old man, he told me one time, he said, the one thing you learn when you get older is that lifelong relationships it's what it's about. However, you don't realize that until you're at the end of your life. So in order to make those happen, you have to start now.
Yeah. Because you don't want to regret, you know, just, not talking to somebody because you were so caught up, right? You're not experiencing something because you're like, I'm so afraid of the feeling. Like a lot of times people are afraid of vulnerability. They've got
Mm,
shame, they're scared, there's fear, and fear causes a lot of damage.
mhm,
Like, regardless, like fear can cause a lot of damage and
mm.
internal and external. And it's really important for people to kind of face their fears. And it's a hard thing to do. It's not an easy thing to tell somebody face their fear because like it's going to take work, right?
Yeah, and it's the same story again and again, and it's a cycle, the heroic cycle. The same thing happens again and again, just at a different level, and you just graduate to the next one, then graduate to the next one. But this is life, right?
Yeah. Well, I think some people think they're going to get somewhere, like they get their degree, they get
Yeah.
they get their their next degree, they get their certificate, they get to this. Oh, I hit the $1 million, but then
Mm,
the problems are still there
they
because
feel they have
like
arrived.
if you don't really address the inner child, you don't address like if you have imposter syndrome, if you don't address that looking glass self, it
Hmm.
doesn't matter what outer, what acronyms you have on your name. What if you have six pack abs, if you look outwardly okay, if you don't
Mm.
address those things, you're still going to have problems.
Yeah, yeah. Actually, I'll even say, I was gonna say you always have problems, but I see it like this: you always have change. It depends on how you view that change. And as you grow older, you learn to roll with the change, to be more accepting of it, and actually how to leverage it. So you will always have, yeah, problems. Some people say they'll have pain, uncertainty, and hard work. All of that is just change. That's just what it is. Change.
Well, you kind of never done until you're not here.
Yeah.
Yeah. The idea
Yeah.
is like something my grandpa said. It's like you're never really done until you're not here. Right.
Yeah.
Because like
Yeah.
you're going to constantly be working until the day you're not on the planet. Right. So I think it's just a lot of times people feel like like they've arrived and then they're like, whoa, oh, it's not what I thought it was. Right.
Yeah.
And so then it's like, it seems like a problem, but it's like, it's an opportunity. It's like the idea in music, we say, there are no bad notes, there are opportunities. So if you
Yeah.
look at that bad note, as I failed and I got to start the whole composition again, I got to start from the top. Or you actually say, well, I can evolve the song and take it somewhere I never thought it was going to go. It's a mindset,
It's
right?
jazz
So it's
speaking.
not that you didn't, yeah, it's not that you didn't make like it didn't sound like it did yesterday. It sounds like it does today.
Hmm. Yeah. 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 You're right. You're right. uh,
So more about the concept that you've been talking about, the show up framework. Like, can you talk about like how did you develop that? Is that your own idea?
that is my yeah, my intellectual property, my IP. From the class, we say we have 21st century skills. And if you have these skills, doesn't matter how the job market is, these are what we need as humans. That is the ability to communicate, the ability to collaborate, the ability to critically think, and the ability to create. Doesn't matter if AI comes, doesn't matter if you lose your job. If you can do these things, work with other people to make to innovate and solve problems, you'll be all right. In the show up framework, what it is, it's personal development. I actually work with the parent. I work with the parent, and I'm using the most relevant thing to them, which is their kid. I've done personal development for a long time. I studied philosophy. My name is Marcus Aurelius, and I'm taking those same principles of how to live a good life from ancient wisdom and modern science and applying it to how they show up for their kid. Because also, it sounds cheesy, but yeah, I care about the kids. Mr. Rogers said, if you care for the kids, support the parents. So I came up with the show up framework. I was telling a friend what I was doing, and he's like, yeah, I'm an entrepreneur and I want to show up for my kid, but it's meeting that balance. And I was like, oh, show up. Okay, yeah, let me put this into an acronym. And that's what it was.
It's kind of like that spark, like I always think about it being a creative, like the muse gives you
Mm-hmm.
things. And sometimes it's not just some kind of magical thing. It's like it's what you process. Like you heard that
Mm.
and you had this idea that you were already working on. And they say, oh, synthesize the internal and the external, and you come up with something,
Yeah,
new.
you got to put yourself in the flow of it. You're right.
It's a kind of flow state kind of processing, which I think a lot of, I think every human being has the ability to be a creator. There's tends to
Everybody
be,
is a creator.
yeah, but there's
Yeah.
a tendency to kind of think, well, the creators are like Shakespeare or Orson Welles, and I'm not in that place, right? Right?
Hmm.
People don't think they are. Say, well, I can't be an artist. It's like I think every human being is an artist. It's just like you are the artist of your own life. You
Hmm.
can paint that picture, right? And there's a lot of disbelief in that until you actually find people that's like, oh, I do have a secret sauce that makes me different than anybody else. It's who I am.
Yeah.
And it's valuable.
And you know things are valuable that are scarce. So the more rare it is, or the scarcer it is, the more valuable it is. Think about this. There's never been an expression of you ever before, nor will there ever be ever again. You are one of an infinite. And when you understand that, like you're more valuable than NFTs. Realize that,
Yeah.
and
I
then
mean, that's the thing.
start
If you
viewing
have
that on purpose.
unlimited capacity, yeah, well, like your brain has like unknown tapped capacity, and each human being has like an unknown tapped capacity, but a lot of us have these limiters on. Like on a car, it
Yeah,
limits it to like 85 miles an hour and it could go
sure,
140,
sure.
but it's limited. You're
Yeah.
putting a limiter on. Like so many people have the limiter on and like they could be getting hitting 150 and they're like stuck at 80.
Well, I will also say this though, or rather, think about this concept, Phantom. There's this book by a positive psychologist called Sean Anker, and it's called Big Potential. And I'll tell you the point of the book is that us combined together, working towards the same goal, it's a bigger potential than just having one star player. And what he did was he looked at those NBA teams, not even teams, but sales teams also, where you have one star player, but then you have two other supporters, and then you have the whole team working with them.
Mhm.
They always went further than if you had a whole bunch of star players.
Oh yeah. We tend to have the value on the star player, like the star sales
But
guy,
but
and not thinking about the whole team.
the whole idea is if everybody knew, this is why a leader sets the vision, and then everybody in their unique way contributes to that. And some people are everybody's giving their full expression towards it, but they're giving their expression in different ways. And the diversity of that then gets us to our goal with more enthusiasm and more enjoyably, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I just
Something
think
we're thinking
it
about.
kind of like I think in a capitalist model, the
Hmm.
tendency is to overvalue certain individuals
Hmm.
and kind
Yeah.
of monetize them. and then that kind of dissuades other people from thinking they're valuable. Because if you
Hmm.
got like
Again,
you think about
what's important? It's a value
yeah,
system.
the CEO is making $300 million, but the designers and engineers and the factory workers, they're not valued anywhere near the level of this one
Mm,
man.
yeah.
So if you got a society that's saying this one guy is worth $300 million, and everybody
Mm,
else is like massively less worth in money, and you have a
hmm.
society that values the money, that it
Yeah.
puts the mind frame on that you're like, okay, I'm not really part of it. Right? I'm not as much a part of it as I could be. You might not be feeling it.
I want to see. I want to see this all in 2 or 3 years, 5 years, when you understand that a CEO's role is to make decisions. But if we have something that costs so much cheaper to make similar decisions, I'm looking forward to the future, man. Like I'm
I'm
excited
looking
for it.
forward to the AI CEO to see, like,
Yeah,
suddenly if the AI CEO comes in, is
yeah,
he willing to step down,
yeah.
or is he going to fight to maintain that position?
When all you're paying for is compute power, yeah. I'm so excited for the future. I am.
Yeah, because then that might like suddenly say, well, why are we giving all these resources to one person when we could take that 300 million and spread it through the organization and get more engineers, more designers, more workers, more graphic, more people who actually could create ideas or concepts or services. How is it that one person in 24 hours could be worth more than all these other human beings in an organization?
You say worth, but I mean, again, it's just going to come down to the question: what does it mean to be human?
Yeah.
And I think AI is going to disrupt to say, yeah, what does it mean to be human? And I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, I think it can really upend things in a good way. Like they're a good fight. There's a good
Exchange.
yeah. There's a lot of different balance. It's like a balance. It's a yin and yang. It's like it's gonna go up and down. It's gonna be like a wave. There'll be some points, and we're gonna learn. We're gonna have lessons learned because we're in a new
Always.
frontier. We're in a
Hmm.
new frontier because this is a lot of stuff that we're gonna hit, and we have no idea. But as human beings, we just gotta we usually use our heart, our head, and our soul, which the machine doesn't have, to kind of figure out where we need to go.
Did are we here? We're good?
Yeah, yeah. Oh, you froze a little bit. Oh, now you froze. I don't know what. Yeah. Oh,
I'm
now
sorry
you're
about that. I'm sorry about that. The
yeah.
modem
I think you're back.
actually.
I think you're back.
Someone just switched to another modem right in the middle. I apologize. That's all right.
Okay, you froze a little bit. I'm like, oh, I lost it.
We're here. We're here. We're here.
but we are kind of near the end. For any kind of final points regarding your website. So if people click on marcushiggs.com, what do they find on your URL?
They'll find a way to connect with me, and also what I do, and then we'll also I'm posting up some workshops there over the summer. So if you're seeing this after August, we'll have some workshops there speaking about how to open up digital conversations for your kid. Yeah.
Okay, that's awesome. So they be able to contact you and be able to like set time with you and make book appointments or like look at your materials from that site.
Yeah. Or sign up to the newsletter where I'll be speaking more about the topics of how to nurture your preteen's potential.
That's awesome. So we always encourage the viewers and the listeners to use the URL, which is fully clickable. When we're published, we're just on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch. All the podcast platforms that we're on the major ones, will have in the description your URL, and it will be fully clickable, and then we're going to click right through. We do encourage everybody that checks this out and wants to have a further, dive into everything Marcus Higgs. Do click on that.
All right. Thank you. It's been wonderful being here.
Thank you very much for being on the Family Electric Ghost podcast. Have a wonderful rest of the day.
Have a beautiful day, man.